Welcome back to the workshop, everybody. So glad you could be with me here today. Walter here at the workbench. Last time we were together, I was planing some green wood. We talked about green woodworking and how you hide the joinery in case there's shrinkage and so on. Today I want to follow up on that, at least that thought process, with an answer to how fast wood dries. Well, it depends. And I'm sorry, that is the answer. It depends. There are so many factors. For instance, which wood? Was it felled in the winter when the sap was down, or was it felled in the spring and early summer when the sap is up? What are your air conditions? Is it tropical and moist? Or is it arid and dry? Is it a desert? So the right answer is it depends. So, for instance, this is cherry. Cherry, tulip poplar, walnut, butternut, and a few other hardwoods which have similar grain characteristics are fairly easy to dry as long as you don't have crazy grain, crotches, knots, and so on. So, the other day this wood was virtually, I'm not going to call it green, it was probably slightly drier than green. By the time it got handled a few times and it got to my place. So if we put a moisture meter on it, set for cherry, and I'm using the Ligno Scanner D by Lignomat, and that has a flat square plate on the back here, about 1.5 inches square or so. So if I put that on here, I'm getting a 14, 15, 16 was about up there, 14 down here, 13 there, and 12 there. So I'm getting a very wide range. And why is that? It's partly because I'm measuring thinner wood than 3/4 inch thick. So if I take two of the stickers out and I lay it right on top of each other, let's see what we get. 15.4, 14.8, 14.6, and 13. So we're getting a little higher reading with the two boards put right on top of each other. And that only makes sense because the wavelengths were passing right through the board and you're not getting an accurate reading. So the other thing that will affect how fast your wood dries, so just getting back to those readings, even if I go as high as 20% in any of these pieces, that's still relatively dry in comparison to relatively wet. So if these boards shrink, they're only going to shrink half of what I had on the last calculations. I mean, it's going to be negligible now. But when we stack lumber, the only way to dry wood is to put stickers between them. And they're called stickers. And this wood is stickered. And the process is to stick the lumber. And so that is what it's called. And it just means nothing more than sticking sticks between the lumber. So typically, for a 1-inch board, you would want to use 1-inch stickers. So this wood is between 3/8 and half. I really should be using 1/2-inch stickers. If I were to use 1-inch stickers on this lumber, it would allow a lot more air to pass through and the wood would dry faster. Using 1/4-inch stickers, it's drying slower. So that allows for a little better stability. A little bit slower drying is not a bad thing. When you get up into the thicker timbers, 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch thick, there's the old rule, you want to air dry them a year for every inch of thickness. That is a general rule. If you have clear white pine, clear basswood, aspen, even some of the tulip poplars, if you sticker them with 1-inch sticks and you're doing 1-inch boards and you have a nice breezy dry summer, they'll dry a lot faster. But you don't want them to dry too fast. What happens to a board when the surfaces and the edges dry too fast? It won't happen to these little guys. I could probably stick these in an oven on low and then slowly bring up the temperature and they'd be dry overnight. They may warp a little bit more, but they probably would not crack because they are relatively dry at anywhere from 13 to 16%. But if you dry thick lumber, and 1-inch thick, 2-inch thick, 3-inch thick, I don't care what the thickness, if you dry it too fast, you do something called case hardening. You wrap a case of dry, ultra dry wood around the outside of the board. And the center of the board now cannot dry. That moisture will stay inside until conditions change, allowing it to migrate to the surface. Now, what those conditions would be is the surface has to go to a higher moisture content than the core. So you'd have to steam it. All right, so that's how they try to fix case hardened timbers. They steam the chamber and then slowly dry it so it all comes to equilibrium. I've seen whole 100,000-foot kilns filled with lumber, expensive lumber, get totally ruined by a poor kiln operator who tries to speed things up, and it's just ruined. Okay, so case hardening would be one problem. The other problem is if you dry it too fast, it will warp, cup, twist, and crack. If you dry it too slow, what's the downside of drying it too slow? The downside of drying it too slow may be you're going to get some enzymatic staining, okay? This happens to be weathering. This was out in the weather. So that's just dirt and patina. The optimum drying condition for anything, whether you're doing it air dried or whether you're doing it kiln dried, and I don't care what kind of kiln, it doesn't matter. If you take more than 1 or 2% of the surface moisture off when compared to the core moisture, all right, it's relative to the core moisture. If you're pulling more than 2% off the surface than is in the core, it's too fast. 1% is perfect. If you can change the outside surface and the core by 1% every day, 30 days, it's dry. Okay? So, air drying, a year, stickered, outdoors, under a protected cover. I'm not talking about tarping it. I'm talking about a lean-to or a barn. keeps the rain and snow and sun off of it. A year per inch of thickness outdoors. Then, when it has reached equilibrium with the outdoors, you have to bring it indoors and do the same. You don't just bring it in and use it. You have to do the same. You have to bring it indoors, you have to re-sticker it, and you have to keep air moving through it so that it can continue to equalize. So as you can see, it takes a sizable amount of space and inventory for a workshop to have enough wood on hand, and why kiln drying became so popular. That is a beautiful shaving. Because they went from having wood tied up for anywhere from a minimum of a year to 2 years to as many as 10. To having them done in 30, 60, 90 days. The thicker stock still takes a long time. You still have to let that air dry for at least a full year or two outdoors, under cover, before you can put it in a kiln. Unless you have a vacuum kiln. We had all of my baseball bat blanks I would make and use were in the latter years all vacuum dried. One of the reasons was speed. In 5 to 7 days they had it out. And that was 3 1/4 inch thick squares of hard rock maple and northern white ash. And there was no staining, no enzymatic staining, no sticker stain, no dark color. They were all bright white. And some people say the wood was more stable, but I don't know about that. So that's about it for today. How long does it take the wood to dry? It will be dry and stable when it reaches equilibrium. And there are charts out on the internet. You can look up for wood moisture equilibrium, and you can plug in, like, if you had the wood in a humidity controlled room and it was 65 degrees in there at 55% humidity, and you left that wood in there for a year, what would the moisture be? Okay, it'll tell you 9.6, 10.2, whatever. It'll tell you the exact moisture. So I use that sometimes as an indicator when humidity has gone up for a long time or down for a long time. I'll go in, I'll say, okay, what should this be today? And then I take my moisture meter and put it on there, and it's usually pretty close. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, just leave it down there in the comments section. And I welcome those of you who may not have yet subscribed to go ahead and subscribe. I believe it's up there. And don't forget to ring the bell. That's up there too. Ring the bell so you get notifications when I do a new video. And I hope you found something useful, helpful, maybe entertaining. Boy, that's pretty cherry. Well, that's cherry, that's shavings. Go out to your shop and make some shavings. Walter out.